Much of the president's agenda and actions to support it have been implemented so far through temporary measures like executive orders. The reconciliation bill currently making its way through the House is the first real opportunity to codify those changes into law. Here with insights as to what's in and what's out of this important legislation, WTOP's Capitol Hill correspondent, Mitchell Miller. Mitchell, welcome back.
Thank you very much. Good to be back.
Well, you've got a lot to watch up there. What is going on with the big, beautiful bill?
Well, this is really the most critical week of the big, beautiful bill for the president that we've had since he's come into office. And House Republicans, and including House Speaker Mike Johnson, will let you know that they have been working on this for months. And this is really the moment that they had been hoping for. And of course, the big thing was they got through these massive marathon markups last week in those three committees. And the fact that they got to that point, sometimes you never know what's going to happen with sometimes volatile Republican conference in the House. But House Speaker Mike Johnson has managed to navigate this. There are obviously a lot of things that still need to be worked out. But to get to this point was a really big deal so that the House could actually get close to the deadline that he had set for himself quite a while ago, saying that he wanted to get it to Memorial Day weekend. So we'll see what happens this week, but certainly big accomplishments there for the Speaker. And of course, all of it related to the Trump tax cuts, which are now being brought to the fore again, as well as those major Medicaid cuts that a lot of Democrats have been railing against. And then there's been a lot of other little more subtle things, but not so subtle to federal workers in connection with changes that may be coming their way.
Well, things that come out of committee often look very different than they did when they went into committee. So were there any surprises in this process, or are the negotiations going to be around the things we expected?
I think the latter. I think they are going to be around the things that we expected. There are still some issues related to various tax cuts and how they will affect various lawmakers and their constituents. But the big part of the big, beautiful bill really is essentially in place. It's whether or not some of these things, as you mentioned, in these committees will actually change. And I think the biggest changes we probably are going to see will actually be later this year. Once this, assuming it does get through the House, gets to the Senate, there have been some real clear signs that various senators, whether they're Republicans who want deeper cuts or Democrats that say, wait a second, we're not so sure about changes, for example, to the federal employee retirement system, whether all of these things are actually going to shake out. So certainly a lot more changes that are going to be on the way, especially when this goes to the upper chamber.
That's right. Speaker Johnson may pull a rabbit out of his hat, but that rabbit still has to meet the Senate at some point.
Right. And it's going to be hopping around the Capitol quarters for quite some time.
Oh, golly. Well, we mix our metaphors and go back to the Easter egg hunt with that rabbit.
That's right.
So what else is happening? This reconciliation bill has got to get through in order to move any kind of budget discussions forward. And those budgets are going to be the place where we maybe see codification of the things that Doge has done so far.
Right. And this was something that the White House really wanted to get done as the president rolled out these dozens of executive orders. Of course, as we all know, an executive order only goes so far if it doesn't get codified by Congress. And there was a lot of discussion earlier in the session about getting these cuts codified from Doge. By some estimates, they could be close to $9 or $10 billion. However, because budget reconciliation has sucked up so much political oxygen out of all the rooms on Capitol Hill, that looks like it's going to be put on the back burner. It's certainly something that the White House wants to get done, but a lot of lawmakers, if you speak with them, they will say, well, we would like to do that on the Republican side, but it's just not going to happen right away. So I think this is going to be more of a long-term goal for the White House to get these cuts codified because, of course, if they're not, then whoever is the next president, if they don't like those executive orders, they can immediately be reversed and they can put in their own executive orders. And then we could be going back and forth on a lot of these issues.
As we have been for a while. I'm speaking with Mitchell Miller, Capitol Hill correspondent for WTOP. Well, Mitchell, speaking of Doge, there is a Doge caucus in the House, and now they're talking about a Doge lifestyle. What's going on actually with the actions from Doge, and how is Congress responding to it?
Well, depending on what party lawmaker you talk to, they are either trying to resuscitate it or others are saying it's actually completely dead. Now, some of the Democrats who wanted to be part of the Doge caucus say it really never met congressionally during this whole process when a lot of complaints were coming from Democrats about Doge doing things without transparency. And so it really didn't take off in the way that some of the Democrats were hoping, that they were saying, hey, look, we want to cut waste and bloated spending too. But there really was no cooperation related to that. On the other side, some Republicans, most notably, I would say Iowa Senator Joni Ernst, who has been a big time proponent of making sure that there is not waste well before Doge came along. She has said that she does still think that there is room for this Doge approach to things, that you can continually look at whether or not agencies and federal bureaucracy, parts of the federal bureaucracy, are really working. And if they're not, then go ahead and try to make the cuts. So I don't think that it is completely dead yet. Obviously, the fact that Elon Musk has basically exited the building means that it's not going to have quite the force that it did early on. But I do think that you will feel the reverberations of Doge through Congress in one way or another, and certainly through the executive branch for quite a while.
Couldn't you make the argument that that is what the congressional oversight committees are supposed to do?
You very well could. And it's interesting because whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans, they both pound their chests and say they really want to do oversight. But then when one party or another comes into power, the oversight changes, of course, and what one side sees as weaponization, the other side sees as something that needs to be done within the government. So I think there is going to be, to your broader question, though, I think there is going to be a reassertion of government oversight, because whether you're Democrat or Republican, this is one of the chief things that Congress does, right? The power of the purse and oversight, making sure that spending is going the way it should be. So because of the way that the president has pushed the envelope on executive power, you do hear Republicans and Democrats both saying that maybe things need to be put more in balance as things move forward.
Well, and that power of the purse is not just the budgeting and appropriations process that we talk about so much, but it's also execution. And they're going to have a real challenge sorting out who paid for what in 2025, are they not?
I think they definitely are going to have trouble doing that, because you've got the Doge cuts in there, you've got a lot of appropriations, a lot of moving parts, and then we're moving quickly into 2026 with the skinny budget. So like sorting all of that out, it's probably more complicated now, I think, than it has ever been, because as we learned, just as one example, we learned with the congressional appropriations process that many of these agencies that have been most subject to the deepest cuts with federal workers losing their jobs is in part because the Congress did not specify specific levels of employment within these agencies or within these boards. And as a result, the Republicans and the president, through executive orders, could say, well, you know what, this wasn't spelled out specifically by Congress, so we're going to take it to court and see what happens. One of the rare cases where it did not happen was with the Voice of America, because there was an actual level of employment specified by Congress. So I think that is also going to be something that lawmakers are going to be looking at in the future. How specific do they need to be when they're writing up legislation? Do they need to get that granular to actually specify how many people are within a department or an agency?
That seems to align very much with the Chevron deference case as well, that says if you want to make a law, you have to legislate the specifics and not leave it to the executive branch to fill in the details.
Right. And I think that's been a big learning curve for a lot of lawmakers. Certainly when you talk to lawmakers, we all know that some people are more into the broader policy issues and some are very much into the nitty-gritty. And I think that there is going to be more of an emphasis on the nitty-gritty side of things, that people really need to be very, very specific. Obviously, lawyers know this, that you have to be specific with the language when you get to the legislation. But I think that's been really highlighted even more so by what we've seen over the last few months.
Perhaps a full employment plan for congressional staffers then.
Absolutely. There's plenty of work there.
A hot job market. Well, Mitchell, will look to touch base with you again right around Memorial Day and find out if the big, beautiful bill makes it through.
All right. It should be interesting.
Thanks so much for joining me.
You bet.
Mitchell Miller is Capitol Hill correspondent for WTOP. We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Hear the Federal Drive on your schedule. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.